Well, this is Christmas Eve, December the 24th, 2020, and kind of do an update on the situation as it's developed. Basically, the main development is that President Trump kind of threw a hand grenade into the political process by vetoing the Defense Authorization Act, and at the same time, a refusing to sign for the moment the big porculus plus COVID relief bill that he was handed. Now, I guess the motivations for this are unclear. One has to understand that the negotiators, which the Secretary of the Treasury was highly involved in representing President Trump, had never really pushed for $2,000 stimulus checks in the bill. And then he claims that that is the reason that he's not willing to sign the bill. And then adds to the fact that there's all sorts of foreign aid items and a few other pure pork items that are in the bill. But one has to remember that many of those items, at least in the foreign aid packages, were actually part of his budget proposal. So maybe he doesn't realize what's in his own budget proposal. This could very well be, in that sense, an argument between him and the bureaucracy that he supervises, because his bureaucracy is a little bit on the mutinous side, as we've noticed at times. And also, but I think it largely, in my opinion, is a reaction to the Senator McConnell's declaration that Biden was the winner and unwillingness to support his election challenges in the vote counting on January the 6th. And at least that's my read on it. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I think. I don't think this is, on that side, is high principle. On the other case, I look at the veto of the defense authorization bill as largely a battle over he wants the Section 230 protections for the big tech companies to be removed. And of course, that's something that's not going to go through the House at this point for sure. And the big tech has too much lobbying power. And obviously, this is basically, again, a retaliatory move in part from his point of view for them costing him the election, which I'm sure they were a big player in that factor. So I think that's something that's going to get overridden. And there is a little nuance to the whole thing, which, of course, is, well, what about our two Senate candidates in Georgia, which are kind of critical to holding back the liberal administration that's coming in. And so that leaves us with a bit of a sticky point there. But I think we already have had a vote on the attempt by Nancy Pelosi to add up the $600 stimulus check to $2,000, and that failed because it was put up forth on unanimous consent. It's obvious somebody would vote no on that. I mean, even if both parties were behind it, which they weren't, it would still have failed. Which I guess, in a sense, leaves the Senate off the hook for the moment because they don't have to face the issue of do they want to bring it up by unanimous consent or not. So essentially, at the moment, the bill is as it is, and so it's unclear what the president will do. What's interesting about that is also, well, let me go into a little detail here. This is being a little mischaracterized. There's two major components to this bill. One is COVID relief, $900 billion, and one is funding for the rest of fiscal year 2021, the $1.3 trillion, okay? And that's how you get your total. Okay, most of the things that President Trump and most conservatives are railing against are in the $1.3 trillion funding for the rest of the fiscal year, which includes all the budgets for foreign aid, the budgets for miscellaneous projects, and it's almost always these miscellaneous projects and foreign aid that always become a big bugaboo in the discussion. And there are a few other things in there too that are rather annoying. I think on the COVID bill there was stimulus checks for the children of dependents of illegal aliens or something. I'm not sure how that goes because, I mean, I don't know whether the illegal aliens are paying income tax or not. But at any rate, that was supposedly in there. But for the most part, that was actually a COVID relief bill. It had the Paycheck Protection Program for small businesses. It had these stimulus checks and a bunch of other, money to distribute the vaccines and things of that sort. And there's also some other miscellaneous things that I'm sure we would find objectionable when we look into the details. But I think it was a combination here that's led to this big blow up when they put the two together. But the kicker is that if it isn't signed, the government will shut down on Monday. So you're going through one of these shutdown battles, which they could either do the worst thing from Trump's point of view really would be if they just did a temporary extension until after he's out of office. He wouldn't like that, I don't think. And of course, maybe he'll veto that too. You see, or the alternative would be that they work on some kind of a compromise where he signs this bill, but they have a follow-up bill. But then can he trust him? Probably not. So about all he could probably trust him to do is to increase the stimulus checks to $2,000. But this process may actually delay everybody from getting anything. And extended unemployment, of course, is running out too, which is in there. So, at any rate, that's kind of where we are on that whole deal. And that's going to be kind of, I guess, an issue coming up on the weekend after Christmas for the Congress. I don't know if they're going to come back or not. They also have to come back at some point to probably override the defense bill. Now we get to the other thing, which I'm personally more concerned about, is that the issue of the special elections in Georgia. Because after all, this is who's going to control the Congress for the next 2 years. If the Democrats were to win that puts them in the majority, and they would be able, in principle, to do just about anything they want, assuming they can get all their members to cooperate, which may still be an issue. But they'll be able to do a lot more of what they want with that than they would be if the two Republicans win, or for that matter, even if only one of the two Republicans win. So the question is what impact this will have. The other issue that the press is making a big deal about is that, well, these two candidates had supported this and voted for this big $2.3 trillion package, and now the president's vetoed it, so that puts them somewhat in opposition to the president. And of course, the Democrats, in a very servile manner, come back and say, "Oh, I'm with Trump on the $2,000 check." So again, a lot of the politics is playing to the most ignorant people out there who almost decide most close elections, right? I mean, the hardcore left-wing Democrat knows who they're going to vote for, and I knew who I'm going to vote for, but the people in the middle, the fuzzy wuzzies, as I call them, they don't know quite what to do. And who knows, they may vote on some of this stuff. It's kind of like tossing a coin to decide your future, Because, I don't know, I guess $2,000 cash could be a point, but the question is who's going to get it for you. The other thing I'd like to point out about that is this is being mischaracterized. This is not help for the needy. This is really just a refundable tax rebate, credit, or what do you want to call it. It's like a tax credit in that it doesn't matter what your tax is, how much tax you paid. It does matter what your adjusted gross income is, because everybody gets the full amount under $75,000 adjusted gross income. And I think twice that for a couple, which actually favors couples a lot, because often one person in a couple will make significantly more than the other, whereas a single individual that might make, well, at any rate, I'm not going to get any of it, and so it's largely because, remember, it's based not on what your income is now. It's based on what your income was on the tax year 2019 tax filing. And I was actually fully employed at that time before I retired. So point is that it's not a personal issue with me on getting it or not, and I'm not negative on other people getting it in that sense. But I just want to point out two cases. One person making $75,000 a year adjusted gross income, okay, who works in an office, who's now working at home on their laptop computer, fully employed the whole time, no cutback in their earnings at all during the period, probably even having less expenditures because they probably didn't go on a vacation or something. So they're not financially hurt by this situation, and they'll get the check. Another person who's working for a maybe 10, 15, 10, $12 an hour, at a small business that shut down because of the lockdowns. They're getting no income other than their unemployment benefits for this whole time. They get the same check. I mean, so it's not really being directed to those who need it per se. And most people weren't laid off during this whole period. The majority of people still were employed, although a very large number of people were laid off. A very large number of people had reduced hours, but not everybody, and I don't think even a majority. So now you could also say there's essential workers that had to go out and work in a COVID-infected environment and were put at risk and maybe got sick due to it, and this could be somewhat of a compensation, although depending on your outcome on the illness, if you had a mild case, it's probably not, if you had a serious case and died, well, you probably won't get the check because you're dead. So at any rate, you see what I'm saying? Fairness has little to do with this part of the program. Its real merit, if it has any, is simply GDP level of stimulus. You just throw out all those billions of dollars to people that might be more likely to spend it than save it, from their point of view, and hope that they spend it to prop up the GDP. That's why it's called a stimulus check. It's really, and if you really were trying to help people, you would probably try to target it more in the direction of, funding food banks and, like I say, maybe a lump sum payments to people that lost their jobs, more support for small businesses that are hard hit, and restaurants, bars, that sort of thing. Hair salon, whatever, So, at any rate, this kind of gives you an idea of what that is, and we'll just see how they work it out. But I'm concerned a little bit again about the elections in Georgia, and will that have any impact? It's hard to know. Right now, the Real Clear Average polls has Purdue ahead by 1% and Loeffler ahead by 0.2%. When you look into the details, there's a lot more variability among the polls than you'd normally expect. From one poll, a couple of polls from Survey USA, which say the Democrats just have it, to other polls that indicate the Republicans will probably win. And I think there's another TV poll down there, TV station poll, that basically says it's a true dead heat like the Real Clear Average says. Looking at the internals, the Trafalgar poll is an interesting one. During the general election, it was closer to right than the mainstream polls, but it was still wrong. That is to say, it showed Trump winning these key battleground states by a small amount. Instead, he lost them by a small amount, whereas the mainstream polls had him losing them by a comfortable margin for Biden. So you can't rule this guy out. And since everybody has it sort of close, he may have a message. And it's interesting enough that Loeffler may be in better shape than Purdue is, because there seems to be a serious Wilder effect. I mean, it's really true that Raphael Warnock really is radical liberal Raphael Warnock, whereas Ossoff is more like your typical California Democrat. If you see what I'm getting at. So, but they're both very, very liberal, particularly by Georgia standards. I mean, so we'll have to see how that pans out. The other thing being a special election with Trump no longer being on the ballot, one might think that will help the Republicans in one way because, the Trump vote included a significant number of Democrats who are disillusioned with the Democrat Party, as well as a hardcore Republican conservative base. And so one might think that maybe these Democrats won't be as likely to turn out to vote for radical liberal Democrats either. And since Trump's not there, they might just stand down, whereas the moderate Republicans from the suburb that really were in the anti-Trump faction might still turn out to vote for these two Republicans. On the other hand, it could turn out totally different than that. And the question is, of course, how does all this chaos about bills that should have just been signed and settled by normal standards becoming issues in the campaign? And of course, these senators are going to be forced to decide what they're going to do when it comes to voting. Are they going to vote to override either of these bills against Trump, if they vote to override, will Trump come on the day before the election and campaign for them? And what we say, well, you voted against me, but I'm here for you anyhow. Or will they vote with them and then supposedly anger people that are for these positions, but really have no effect actually on the outcome, by the way? Their vote isn't really needed. Or the third possibility is just not to show up, just to stay campaigning because the election is so close, and they were confident that the outcome had already been determined, it would have no impact. Perhaps the latter is the chicken way out. I don't know. Well, there's to see how they handle it. I guess it's a personality thing, and maybe it may depend on what Trump insists on. Because I say Trump is not in a happy mood. He's definitely not there's a famous movie, Patton, where he makes the comment he wouldn't give a hoot in hell for somebody that lost and laughed. Well, one thing for sure about Patton, he may have lost, but he sure isn't laughing. So, and as I point out, I'm all for Trump winning. I really wish we could have had an investigation of the voter fraud, and I think some of these states could have been flipped if it had been done properly. But the problem is, again, the lack of time and a true lack of will on the part of the courts. I mean, the Supreme Court, was supposed to respond to Trump's last emergency lawsuit as of yesterday, and as far as I've heard, they haven't even said anything. So they're just ignoring it, I believe. As if they ignored all the Kraken lawsuits, the Lynn Wood lawsuit. They're just sitting there doing nothing. And that's probably what they'll do. And also, as I pointed out, the problem with election challenge, it turns into something more like a protest than it is a effective measure. In other words, Trump can get a vote on it, but with a protest, but in the House it will fail no matter what the Republicans do. And I've already gone through that in previous video, so I don't need to belabor it here, but that's just a fact. And in fact, in the Senate, given the attitudes of McConnell and company, it will fail in the Senate too, probably massively. And so it's really just a protest. And also, I understand he's encouraging people to show up on the 6th of January for a wild protest. So, like I said, it is a protest, but it isn't going to change the outcome. And so, maybe I should add the word unfortunately, but the point is it isn't going to. I don't see really anything that's really going to change the outcome at this point on that. And that's the way the cookie crumbles, so to speak. So anyhow, just want to close this up, wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year's. And like I said, if you like these videos, please give me a like, and you can subscribe on YouTube if you have an account, and forward them to anybody that might be interested. Anyway, all for now.